Good evening, everyone. This is Town Council meeting October 2nd, 7 p.m. at the Harvey Hearing Room. It's being cablecast by WCAT. Councilor Boncory, would you lead us with the Pledge of Allegiance? Someday we'll get some new chants.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the Town Council minutes from the September 18th meeting as circulated. So moved. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the ayes have it. General information and recommendations. We have Jerry DeFranza. He's going to do a presentation on white cane awareness, I believe. Is that correct, Jerry?
Yeah,
Okay, you're on.
thank you for allowing me to speak. October is the Blind Month. October 15th is the National Day. The Lions Clubs of America actually developed the white cane is to identify that someone is blind, to tell the motorists that someone is blind. And we want to, our goal with the commission is to reach out into the community and educate the community what the white cane represents. It does represent independence so that we can travel independently and safely. Among our elderly, though, some of our elderly who are older blind are also hard of hearing, so we have to take that into consideration as we travel. And I have given the committee material to read and review, but one of the problems I saw is that our bikers don't pay attention to the white cane, and a lot of the bikers, they are on the sidewalk, which makes it difficult for us to travel and see where we're going. So we would appreciate if they would earmark where their bikes are going to be located so that nobody will get hurt. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
I missed the roll call. Would you please call the roll?
Counselor Ringman. Here. Counselor Calla. Present. Counselor Christopher.
Yeah.
Counselor Terry.
Yeah.
Counselor Soto.
Here.
Counselor McDuffie.
Here.
Counselor Conti.
Present.
Vice President Boncory.
Here.
President Becchia.
Here.
Thank you.
Is there anybody here from question 1? Okay. Public comment. Please keep it to 3 minutes. Yes.
Tonight we call upon our town council with your vested powers to guide and serve our community. As was evident at the recent town marijuana public forum that addressed this issue, a great number of speakers addressed concerns and cited professional reasoning, especially those for our youngsters who are under 20 years old. CASA, our school nurse, and many others bringing forth the established findings. Also, in the general population and attending, was pointed out that it was felt there was a lot of confusion around the wording on the November 16th Massachusetts state ballot. Under question 4, the header is Massachusetts marijuana legalization incentive. A yes vote supports this proposal to allow the use, cultivation, possession, and distribution of recreational marijuana for individuals at least 21 years of age. A no vote opposes this proposal to allow the use, cultivation, possession, and distribution of recreational marijuana for individuals at least 21 years old. So much more has come to light, and documented facts of both in the medical and the legal professions around the short-term, long-term damage in the developing brain. Also at the public forum, many people's concern was that they did not feel that the vote was clear. and allow for marijuana establishments here in Winthrop. The word usage being the key. Tonight's meeting agenda items are very important to our committee, and I would like to enter here a committee member rights. My thoughts and concerns are similar to so many other citizens. There are many businesses in the Center Business District that provide services and activities to children. For Kids Only, Savisi's Martial Arts, 2 daycare centers, a gymnastic studio, and other martial arts studio in Michael's Mall. We have an elementary school within walking distance of the center. At any given time during the day, the center is filled, especially after school, with children using those businesses that provide activities. As a grandmother with grandchildren that frequent the center every day, I am not comfortable, and we are not comfortable with the idea of a marijuana establishment being somewhere within the center, given the traffic it may produce, the possible use of the product within that area, and we appreciate the council's real consideration of these, along with other valid concerns that we have expressed in the decision-making. Respectfully, Elizabeth Ronan, Precinct 4, she's a member of our initial committee. The decision by the council, the question being, will you take positive action? Shall Winthrop adopt the following bylaw to prohibit the operation of one or more types of marijuana establishments within Winthrop? It is the hope of many that you will move favorably to represent your community and that you will not want, page turn, a marijuana establishment to come into the town of Winthrop. And we're asking the board at this time, we've discussed the 1,200 signatures, we're prepared to do this, but we are asking the board to really seriously take the bull by the horns. You have the legal areas and parameters with which to vote and to work and to guide. And would you please take that into consideration when you have your discussion tonight? I believe it's on the agenda, and we thank you. And I have a committee here that I would like to just have you stand briefly, and this is our inside committee. And we have a couple that are already down with the flu, so remember the flu shot clinic is tomorrow night down at the landing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to be heard? Yes.
There's no objection. I'd like to read for the record an email that I sent to the council last Thursday. Is there anything? Dear councilors, first of all, thank you for hosting the very informative public forum entitled, quote, Discussion of Town Marijuana Moratorium that was held on September 11th. As was pointed out at the forum, given the town of Winthrop voters voted yes on the 2016 ballot question regarding recreational marijuana, it will be legal to sell recreational marijuana in Winthrop through a licensed facility, unless otherwise decided by a referendum vote of the citizens of Winthrop and a vote of the council, or, both prior to December 31st, to ban the sale of recreational marijuana in Winthrop. Several communities have already voted to ban the sale in their communities. The referendum will have no effect on the legalization of marijuana. It will address only a ban on the sale of recreational marijuana. Regarding the item under old business on the council agenda for next Tuesday, that's tonight, that had been postponed from the September 18th council meeting. The item on the agenda is Town Council Vote Special Election Marijuana Retail Establishment. Given some apparent confusion and misunderstanding of the 2016 ballot question by many Winthrop residents, I urge the council, regardless of your individual opinion on the legalization and sale of marijuana, to schedule a referendum vote prior to the deadline of December 31st. The sole purpose of this referendum should be to let the voters be heard, clearly expressing their wishes regarding the sale of recreational marijuana in Winthrop. Please feel free to contact me regarding this matter. And I'd like to thank the 3 councilors who did acknowledge this and contact me.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Riley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you and the council for the opportunity to address you. I had a few things I wanted to discuss. They're pretty brief and I can run through them quickly. The first one is I have a question. I'd like to talk to somebody about an answer for it. Does any town board, or is there any way for someone to circumvent the requirements of height in the zoning area or any other aspect of a center zoning? Somebody wished to build something that did not conform to what's in the zoning thing. Is there a place where they can go, and then a board that would allow them to do that? I was at a planning board meeting some time ago, and it was inferred that the planning board had that authority. I don't find anything that gives them that authority, but it might be in the center business district zoning, but it might appear somewhere else. Maybe the zoning board of appeals, or perhaps there's nobody that can grant that the restrictions stay as they're written. But for instance, properties adjacent to a residential district have a limit of 2.5 stories. So if somebody wanted to build beyond that, can they petition to do that? And if so, where would that petition go? The other one is I would recommend that the council adopt the clear boundaries of the center business district. We went through an awful lot of work to do that. Terry Delahanty did some exhaustive work to do it, but Terry had pages up to here with recommendations. I think it would be better to have it in one clear place, clearly defined, mapped out, and adopted by the council. I think with all of the reports that we had to go through, I think if somebody could find a way to challenge what's the position of the town right now. I think everybody agrees on what the boundaries are. I don't think we have to discuss what they are. I think we've talked about it enough, but I think it would be helpful if the council adopted an ordinance that set the boundaries out as they were defined in Mr. Delahanty's report. The last one is the zoning petition that was filed in May. The council's required to take action on that. But we've got a couple of things that I think we need to consider. I think that in order to do this, we need to review the center zoning with a broad participation of people who have interests in it, particularly the neighbors, but people who own businesses in the center, other citizens of the town, to talk about what it is we want and do. One of the practical reasons for that is 3 members of a council have appropriately indicated that they're going to recuse themselves when these things come up. That leaves 6. It needs 5 votes to pass. I think if something doesn't have broad support and doesn't go through a process where we come up with it, that we have broad agreement on what it is, it's going to be very difficult for you to pass anything. So what I would suggest is I think there's 2 ways to go. There might be others that the council could think of, but there could be one of the council committees could be charged with conducting this type of public review and coming back with it. Or a committee could be set up. The town manager or the council could indicate different interest groups that they wanted represented on it, and you could come up with some kind of a committee to do that. But I think something has to be done. I think we're overdue for a response to it. I don't think the response to the petition has to necessarily be yes or no. I think coming up with some comprehensive way of reviewing the petition, reviewing the zoning would be appropriate, and I'd ask you to really seriously consider that and to act on it. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Carol Ficella, and I've come here to speak tonight about the possible referendum for the citizens of our town to vote on whether they want a retail marijuana shop. I have a simple request, and it has 3 components. The first is to ask the board to extend the moratorium so we do not have a deadline that's fast approaching, and I think it's within your power to extend that moratorium. Secondly, I ask you to approve placing a ballot and a question on that ballot which gives the citizens of this town the right to vote of whether they want that establishment. And 3, to waive the requirement that we gather 1,200 signatures to do so. I believe that this town can do that, but it's a lot of time and effort, and why make us jump through those hoops? Regardless of your opinion about this shop, I think there was confusion during that election about whether or not by voting yes statewide, it was an automatic implication that we would have a shop in town. Because of that confusion, I think it behooves the board to approve a ballot and to really find out the will of the people. If they want it, so be it. But if they don't, I think you should be informed and base your decisions on the will of those people. I feel that the board has a responsibility, and that responsibility under law is to protect the health, the safety, and the welfare of our community, regardless of your individual opinions. That's a major task that I know is not an easy one to satisfy. But I ask you to consider those three elements of health, safety, and welfare of our community before making any decisions. I know you've heard a lot of arguments. Certainly, the only argument I can come up with that would be pro for this shop is revenue. And the retailer who's going to benefit individually from gaining money. And the marijuana industry, which is going to become a very big industry. That may be the pro side, but what's the minus side? The minus side is that we're going to all bear the consequences of the adverse effects of this within our very small community. Tonight is not the time for us to debate the pros and cons, because I think that the three questions I asked about putting it on the ballot is one that we can consider. But I do ask as we move forward, not only as a board, but as a community, to consider, and I want to pose questions rather than answers to you. The question of, do we want our community to expand its culture of drugs? Simply put, we have a serious drug problem of our youth in this town. We are sending a message with a pot shop in this town that drugs are really okay and can become easily accessible. Is that the message we want to send out of town? Whether marijuana is legal or not is almost irrelevant. It's addictive. We have spent decades fighting smoking because of nicotine addiction. And now we're sending a mixed message to our community that smoking is bad, nicotine addiction is bad, we're going to fight it. And on the other hand, what about the addiction to other compounds and other substances that are found in marijuana? Is that the message that we want to give our people? We also know by the research, the chemicals in marijuana not only are addictive, but they affect the brain, behavior, and judgment of the person using it. I also want to add to this that what about revenue? The revenue may be far less than you're anticipating. And with that revenue, you're going to end up spending it on law enforcement and spending it on drug treatment programs. It's not going to drive the money that we think we need here. And I ask us all as a community, is this the best way we can get money? It seems like the lowest level we're going to. Can't we be more imaginative, more creative, more inventive to come up with ways to raise money in this community rather than on the backs of our kids and on the citizens?
Thank you.
This help. Can I just finish? I've got to beg the audience to finish these points. May I have that? May I have the permission to do that? Yeah. Okay. Would you like me to finish? Okay. I also fear that there is a potential for developing a black market in Winthrop. What do I mean by that? Any 21-year-old or over can purchase marijuana easily and freely. It is going to become so easy to turn this into a black market of young 20-year-olds turning to teenagers, selling these drugs on the black market to their peers. And this is going to create a big problem in the town, along for law enforcement as well as for the citizens. It will become a hangout for students to be in that area. How do you start to patrol this, and what challenge are we putting on our police officers who are already overburdened? Police officers need to monitor all of this, especially with out-of-towners coming in. Our adjacent community has not approved retail pot shops, so we are now going to have an influx of people from out of town that again become a burden for our law enforcement people. Driving under the influence. With alcohol, we have breathalyzer tests. Police in the field can find quickly who's driving under the influence. We have no such test to measure the effect of driving with marijuana. That is another burden on the police and on us in our terms of our health and safety. In conclusion, I ask the board to please seriously consider your decision for tonight. It's about allowing a ballot to be made, waiving the rights of those signatures, and let's get the will of the people. Your decision will impact our future generations. Once this cat is out of the box, it's going to be hard to put it back in. You won't be able to reverse it. Thank you for the indulgence of time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Brad Branstein, I live in Precinct 6. On the marijuana thing, I just have a little nugget of thought for you. Do you know what the two distinctions are of Lynchburg, Tennessee? It has two major distinctions. Do any of you know what they are? Besides one of them is it's the home of the Jack Daniel's distillery. It's also in a dry county. You cannot buy alcohol there, period. So alcohol's legal in Tennessee. You go to the distillery, can't buy it. So great, marijuana's legal in Massachusetts. Why should we have someplace where you can buy it?
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Committee reports. Finance Committee, Councilor Lettieri.
Finance Committee met this evening, and we had two items on the agenda. One was to transfer $20,000 from the Town Council Reserve to replenish the general fund derelict properties. And the other item on the agenda was for the Town Council to declare the Council on Aging van surplus. We had discussion on both those. We will bring it up in old business, and there was positive action recommended on both.
Thank you, sir. Appointments of commissions and committee. Councilor Lucerto.
So, the Appointments, Commissions, Committee met this evening, 6:30 in this room, ahead of this meeting. We had three things on our agenda. The town clerk contract, so many folks maybe don't know that the town clerk, according to the charter, reports to the council. And we're just working on looking over that, what could possibly be a contract for the clerk, and some other issues, what that evaluation would look like. We're going to probably continue that to our next meeting. We also discussed committee leadership as a check-in, because we have so many committees in town that we don't hear from all that often. So we've been going out to see some of their committee meetings, but I think the feeling within the subcommittee was that we'd like to hear more from the committees and what they're working on, and making sure that those subcommittees are working on some of the larger community goals that we establish here, making sure that they are aware of the public comment that's going on here, what citizens are concerned about. So I think at the next meeting we'll have some motions asking for reports from various different committees, and then start inviting them in beginning of 2019 to come and present to us. The other piece was a Human Rights Commission discussion. So we've done a lot of discussion about whether or not it would benefit the town to have a Human Rights Commission. We're one of the few communities that doesn't have one in our surrounding area. And we've been going back and forth a lot about whether or not we need a Human Rights Commission or we need a Diversity and Inclusion Committee. And so I think, again, at the next council meeting, what we discussed was asking the town manager to provide us with some information on what those two bodies would look like, so we can assess what those needs are in town and make a decision for that, so that something was in place when we start 2019. So that's another motion that'll come at the next meeting.
Thank you, Councilor Lucerto. Any questions or comments? Okay. Millerfield Committee, Councilor Lettieri.
Millfield Committee meeting was last evening. The vast majority of the discussion concerned the field house and the progress of the field house. All the stubbing for the underground plumbing, utilities and such was finished this week. The plan is for the slab to be poured on Saturday, with the plan of the VOC starting next week, vocational school, to start the framing. The plan is that the framing will be fully encapsulated by winter, enabling them to work through the winter. Everything else is going well. Still plans for grand opening of the whole facility, including the field house, September of 2019. All else is well. Thank you.
What's going on with the ticket booth?
Ticket booth is being put up by the high school students, and I think I think it is all framed out. There's a piece of fencing in front of it that we're gonna have to cut back a little bit because it kind of cuts halfway across the ticket booth. But it should be done relatively soon, and it's done by the local kids, which is awesome. And again, the fence will be moved back, and the ticket booth will be there, and it should be open relatively soon.
Very good. Councilor Boncory.
Yeah, the Rules and Ordinance Committee will be meeting on the 9th of October at 6 p.m. to hopefully vent anything that comes back out of the planning board on either the marijuana planning or the Center Business District planning that's been sitting in front of the planning board for some time. There was one issue that had been sent to Rules and Ordinance, and that was to adoption of Mass General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 59B, which sets up the Fire Department Reserve, but that does not need an ordinance in the town, so we're going to be moving forward to vote that tonight.
Very good. Town Manager's report.
Sure. So last week I was at the ICMA conference in Baltimore. Great learning and networking experience for me. It was my first time going to it. Meeting my peers from around the country and also working with people in Massachusetts. It's a unique situation right now because I would say 50% of the people there look like me and are new and fresh in their careers, and the other 50% is either retired or retiring in the next 3 to 5 years. So you have a group learning how to do the job, and you also have a group that are transitioning out of the job. So it's an interesting time for the industry, but there's a fair amount of places and things that I've learned that I think I can kind of bring back here in terms of how we can utilize technology to augment some of the stuff that we're doing here. We can help spend a small amount of money to help people do their jobs a little bit more effectively and efficiently. So those are kind of to come. Just in terms of my report, I'm going to be having Maya come in most likely October or November to do some emergency training of some department heads. It's part of our policy. With some of the things that have been happening in the community lately, I think it would be a good opportunity to review some of our policies that we have and some best practices that are kind of around the industry. So Maya can come in and provide that for no cost for us because it's within our policy. Previously, Stacy DeChara in the HR department had put together some policies that she had went over with Jim McKenna. I want to revisit a fair amount of those policies. Most of them were not enacted. I'm having Gina Ryan look over them. K&P had already helped her produce them previously, but most likely in December or January, I will be presenting a comprehensive set of HR policies for you all to vote on. Things like sexual discrimination in the workplace, internet use policy, social media policy, all those types of things that we need some of these policies in place so that if employees aren't following the policies, we can kind of reprimand and correct the action appropriately. And if it's not corrected, then we can move towards termination. You need to document these things for the future. So this is the way to work on some of these things and try to use rules to move towards best practices and good behavior. So town council rules and procedures, I will most likely be providing the rules and procedures committee with some modernization of how you all are running your meetings. I think there's a way that we can make these a little bit cleaner and a little bit easier, as well as giving the public a better understanding of what we're looking to have them do in the meetings and how we can engage the community in the processes that we're presenting. So that is something else to come, but I look to have that over to your committee in November or December. I'm interviewing for the assistant town manager tomorrow, 4 candidates at this point. All of them could do the job. CFO interviews will be happening most likely the week after next. It's currently posted. We're getting inquiries about it. Another job that I don't think we'll have too hard of a time finding a good candidate for. The vote that came up in our last meeting concerning the Center Business District needs to most likely be brought up again in our next meeting due to a charter versus state law conflict. We're going to go try to pursue the 5 votes and do it that way. I've provided all of you with additional information about the Center Business District. If there are additional questions, I'm more than happy to provide information on it. But I want all of you to feel as informed as possible for the ones that can vote on this issue to be able to vote the way you see fit. I'm gonna skip this last one. This one for just a second. So today there was a Metro Mayors Coalition event in Somerville. Myself and 14 other leaders from the Metro Boston area. So Mayor Walsh, Mayor Curtoni from Somerville, Ambrosino from Chelsea, Brian Rigo from Revere, all of us from around there got together. We've all signed on together to this group coming together to make some housing movement, and we're working along with the state with it. Super ambitious goal was announced today of 185,000 units by 2030 of new units of housing. So this can be new construction. It can also be shifting students out of off-campus housing back into dormitories. Tufts is getting a lot of pressure from Medford and Somerville concerning that, and some of the other colleges around here. So 185,000 is a lot. Boston's committed to 69,000. So over the other 14 communities, that's 116,000 additional units of housing within 11 years. So it's ambitious. We will have an individual goal in Winthrop that will somewhat be presented to us by the MAPC in this group. And we need to kind of work on it, and we need to figure out what type of development around the town works in pursuit of this. And we'll have a goal that, again, when I talk about like a Winthrop 2030 type of plan, we will have a clear number that we're looking to do, and our decision should be using that in the back of our minds whenever we're making decisions about things. So that was a great event today. It was covered by a lot of things, but this group of CEOs are essentially coming together to say this is a regional issue. We're trying to do it as a region. It can't fall on one community, and we're working along with the state. And then the last thing that's going to be brought up later is concerning the additional kindergarten class in the school department that we'll be discussing further. Thank you.
Okay. School department update.
You had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sure.
So we're talking about development and everything in the center, and one of the things that we spoke about when we met a couple weeks ago was a way to help the town identify what the boundaries are in the CBD, like we had tried to do about a year ago, but there's a lot of questions in the neighborhood currently about what they are. Could you explain, I know you've already explained it to me, but explain to everybody what a strategy that the town could pursue in order to identify what those boundaries are and have the council pass some type of a motion?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, it's, I think a lot of confusion comes from a map that was somewhat of a miscommunication from the MAPC. That assistant town manager, although they will have the title of assistant town manager, they are somewhat going to be a planning director in assistant town manager's clothing. And what I really want this position to do is to go out to the community and effectively communicate what we're looking to do in any type of development, or what developers are looking to do, and effectively communicate that with the communities that it's impacting, the individual neighborhoods. But then also talk about the maps and the legal implications of the zoning that we have in place, what parcels are actually impacted by zoning regulations. I don't want confusion about the maps. This is a cleanup in GIS is the mapping technology that you use with it. You do the base level of the parcels, and you do it parcel by parcel. You don't draw a map through property lines and stuff like that. So this is not it's not a unique problem to Winthrop. A lot of people have bad maps and stuff like that. That's something that one of their original tasks is going to be cleaning up that map. And if it is the way it was kind of talked about before, with what Mr. Riley brought up, community process concerning it, that's not a problem. That assistant town manager is going to be, they won't be at these meetings. They're going to be down in the Center Business District and other places in the community, having community meetings about what that area is looking to do, what the stop points are for certain things. I mean, they're probably going to have a lot of conversations about parking and things like that, but they're going to be available to the community and the business owners and things like that to walk them through the legal implications of the zoning that's on the book, how you change any of the zoning if that's something that people want to pursue, and that's really going to be what they're tasked with over the time, most likely the time that I'm here. However long I'm here, that's what that job's going to be doing until, I don't know, you guys come up with 10,000 more units of housing or something like that. So it's a lot of work to do. And I mean, that will also be involved with what happens at Suffolk Downs. I'm talking to the developer that's looking there too. I mean, they're looking at 10,000 units of housing on Suffolk Downs, and that's more people than live in this community right now is going to be in like a decrepit site. So we need to start thinking through some of these things that are happening around us and being prepared to work through some of the onslaughts that are going to happen because of this in the very near future. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And just one more. I had seen that we were not on the list of towns that had entered into a contract, I assume, with Line Bike about the electric pedal-assisted bikes. And I know that we're going into the winter right now, and I think that for next year, I think that these things could have the potential to really solve a lot of the problems that we are trying to solve here in Winthrop. Now that we're going into the winter and there's going to be no line bikes coming up soon, I think it might be a good time to start thinking about regulations that we can put on these things and new ways that we can adopt. Maybe this is something.
So that's something I have. Tangi's working on right now. What she's trying to get from Line Bike is mapping of where the bikes that are rides that originate in Winthrop, where are they going? Are we seeing bikes dropped off here and then they're just taken all other places and dropped off other places? Is there a way that we can kind of cycle some of those bikes back? And is the time that is occurring, is it a mode shift that we're seeing? Is it commuters actually utilizing them to get to other forms of transit? Or is it just people on vacation here looking for an easy way to go down to the center business district and back out to the beach type of thing? So we're trying to get a better sense of the bikes right now. What are they doing? And then in terms of the pedal assisted and electric ones, as of right now, there's only 3 communities that are pursuing scooters and electric scooters in the state, I believe, or of the Lime Bike network right now. This whole region isn't super hot on them yet, and they're trying to regulate. The state is essentially trying to regulate them out for the time being. I mean, just being in Baltimore and Washington, D.C., those things are everywhere, and I saw people fall off them and stuff like that, but they're part of the transportation network in those places. So once we get some of our information together from Lime, I think it would be worth it to just think through, in the event that the state moves forward with it, how are we going to locally regulate it? Because it's like Airbnb and Uber and stuff like that. It's going to be something that's kind of put upon us if we don't regulate it ourselves in the first place. So it's something we'll be working on.
Thank you.
Yep.
One of the other things, now that we've had one season of Lime Bikes, I think we need to really look at locations that could be permanent locations for them.
Yep.
Instead of being on the sidewalks, maybe adjacent to where they are now on a sidewalk, maybe we can put in a cement slab.
Yep.
Your DPW could just do something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
We
you
should
know,
probably-
I look at it as similar to blue bikes, that, you know, blue bikes aren't always on the sidewalks, those stations. A fair amount of those are set up that you take away 2 parking spots so you can have 15 bikes in an area type of thing. So we can explore if there are locations where a fair amount of the rides are originating. Let's get the bikes there, and let's get the bikes set up there type of thing. And even if we paint in 2 parking spots green, and those are the Lime Bike pickup places, that's what we could offer type of thing. So it's something to be explored, and I mean, there's a high amount of usage. There's tens of thousands of rides over a not incredibly long season, and with how hot it was out and a decent amount of rain, it wasn't the super best biking weather either. So yeah, we can work on those things.
Anyone else? No? Okay, school department report. Our superintendent reported that the 92% of the school staff has now been trained on the lockdown program. God forbid we ever need it at the schools. That includes all the staff. It's up to 92%. The goal is 100%. The program is called ALICE, Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. The 11 Foundation sponsored a student cleanup around town. I think you might have saw it in the newspaper. They did a great job all around the different parks. They didn't have too much work to do around the school grounds because the schools were in pretty damn good shape, thanks to our janitors and our staffs that work there. One of the biggest discussion is the overcrowding in the kindergarten classes. That was probably about 20-minute discussion, half an hour discussion. Later on, you will hear a motion which is being sponsored by the town manager to supplement the school budget to offset the overcrowding in the kindergarten. We'll get into that later on in the agenda. And also, the school department voted to endorse the district strategic plan for 2018-2019. Old business. Old business, the first item under old business is the town council vote special election marijuana retail establishments. This was brought up in the last meeting and was put off until this meeting. One of our councilors used his point of personal privilege, and it's back on the agenda. Jim?
I guess I'll start. So I guess to start, I'd like to make a motion, and then we could discuss it, because I'm sure there'll be ample discussion. And I would like to make a motion to hold a special election on, and again, there could be amendments, obviously. I'd like to make a motion to hold a special election on March 29th, 2019, for the purpose of not allowing marijuana retail establishments in the town of Winthrop. That's the motion I'd like to start by making.
A motion's been made. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second is
Discussion
on the motion.
Now, the date, start with the date. I don't think this is something that we could get done this fall. If it can, that's excellent. I don't think it's something we could probably get approval on a moratorium to wait until next fall, when would be our election, which would be optimal, I guess, because it would save us 20 grand. I'm not sure if that's possible. I'm open to all amendments on timing. I just wanted to get it out there that me as a counselor, and I hope to have the support I think there has been ample evidence to say that there was real confusion on the ballot. I've heard from many people personally, and I know counselors have heard from people, and I know we've heard from people at the forum at the high school and over the past two council meetings. So I do think there was an honest misinterpretation or misunderstanding of the ballot question. And I believe it's fair to let the town speak again. There is a cost involved if we have a special election on a date that's not already deemed to be an election, and it is somewhere around $20,000. Also, potentially, it affects the schools as to, what schools are open and closed during that special election. So there are things that have to be worked out, and also, if it is in the spring, we would have to ask the AG to extend the moratorium, but I think if we had a date in place, I think it would be a lot easier to obtain that request. My personal opinion is, I'm a no vote on not on having the special election, but on the question itself. But it doesn't matter. I mean, it's about the citizens to get the right. I mean, there has been, past practice in the last 2 years. We had an election where there was a misinterpretation of what people voted on. So this is not. I'm not asking for something that we've never done in this town. We didn't have a special election for that. We just took it off the scope of work for the Miller Field project, and I'm speaking about the tennis courts. So, in the recent past, there has been a misunderstanding of questions. Maybe we should try to explain the questions better and going forward. But so that is my motion. That's my reasoning for it. I feel we owe it to the citizens and to get a clean vote.
Anyone else wish to be heard on the motion?
This
Still discernible.
So, I mean, I think I have no problem whatsoever with a moratorium until there's an election. And I'm just wondering what our chances are of putting that on the following November election, if we were going to put it there. Is it just that there's no chance the Attorney General won't allow that? Because
I mean, there's a chance, but it's
it's
a long time.
I just think that's also optimal to have everybody come out and vote. Would be voting anyway. We get the biggest sample size of what people care about, and I think I agree that whatever the people vote on is something that we should follow.
Yeah.
Right? But I just want to make sure that we actually get representation of what the community actually really wants, and instead of
Yeah.
just one side of the story.
I would want to get the opinion of the Attorney General's office before I could commit to a November date. You know, if you all thought it was prudent, I think a March date would make more sense. I know the issues with voter turnout and things like that that could come up with that, but this is something I think you may want to try to get voted on sooner rather than later. And it's also something that, I mean, it's unfortunate that we're in the time of the year that we are right now, because it's something that if you had, hindsight is 20/20, if you knew this 10 months ago, you would have already voted on this again and then moved in one direction or another. So it is what it is.
I personally think it should be the spring, and I think we should also tie this whole thing into a package to, contact the AG's office to get an extension on the moratorium.
Yep.
I think if you put the package together that, our moratorium ends at the end of the year, we are gonna have a special election in the spring. We would like a moratorium on any further action in the town of Winthrop until, the middle of the year, whether it be the summer or fall. But I think we should get it done, get it behind us as quickly as possible if we do it. Yes.
I agree, if we're gonna do it, we should get it done as quickly as possible. But just to say we're gonna have a vote without having the ballot question prepared, without being certain about the date, without being certain about all these things,
Why don't we
I think
refer-
it should be referred to a committee, let the committee work on it, let them get together with Carla, find out, when an election could be possible with the school committee, find out about the school, all the things that you're talking about, and to contact the Attorney General's office and put a proper question before us, before we, actually just take a vote to do something.
Well, we're gonna take a vote tonight to do it. You can work out all the other,
You could also take a conditional vote as well, that you could say the optimal circumstance is pushing it towards the November vote. If that isn't able to be reached, it would be a date in March to be determined.
I'd just like to get the vote.
Yeah, I know.
Up or
I know
down.
it gets a
Up or
little
down.
tricky with it being like a conditional vote, but you could give yourself some flexibility with a conditional vote.
At least if we voted one way or the other tonight. If we voted in the affirmative, we assign it to rules and ordinances, they do their work. So the clock starts running.
Yeah. Yep.
At least we know one way or the other whether it's gonna move forward or not. We have folks there's a committee out there that's trying to put petitions together
They come to my
to
office.
do a lot
I
of
let
work.
them.
And, you could short circuit a lot of their work if we at least
Sure.
make the first step this evening.
Absolutely.
That's what I'd like to do. Yes?
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a pretty good compromise to put it over to rules and ordinance, because, that's the whole reason to use my council privilege last time, was to actually have something here that we could actually vote on. And, in the agenda packet, it just end up again as just a line item with no motion attached to it. So I still feel like it would have been better if we actually knew what we were voting on, instead of doing a conditional vote only to have to vote again once it comes back from rules and ordinances. But, I guess that's the compromise that we have at this point, and I'm satisfied with that. I'm just disappointed that the whole reason of doing that was to say we needed to know exactly what we were voting on, and then we didn't get anything. So,
Why can't it go to the next meeting?
so.
I would be willing to amend it to say, I would like to vote, to show a vote of confidence to the citizens of this town. They've put in a lot of work, and it will be that much more work that they're gonna have to continue to do until there's some sort of certainty. So if we can make some sort of motion or amendment, some sort of, that the council,
Rules and ordinances draws up a proposed question and a timeline.
well, the council, that rules and ordinance reports back to us by it could be the 18th, but I would like us to vote that our intention is to have an election no later than the first Tuesday in November of 2019. And the purpose of that question would be to ban marijuana retail establishments in Winthrop. How the wording and phrasing and would be done through rules and ordinance, but I would like to have some sort of vote of confidence that we will be holding a special election or an election. doesn't have to be a special election, I guess, if it's November.
Does the clerk have that?
I think that's fair. You know, I think that's a fair compromise.
Any other discussion?
So-
You want to dictate that again?
So I guess the motion is gonna be that we,
You're gonna amend it, right? Are you amending your original motion?
yeah, to, that the council votes to hold an election to ban marijuana establishments in the town of Winthrop. This election is to be held before by the first Tuesday in November of 2019. And I would also like to request, and I don't know if this is a part of the motion, to request that that this goes to rules and ordinance for proper wording and letter to the AG's office requesting a moratorium until date certain.
Yeah, we can work with that.
I would second the amendment.
Amendment has been made and seconded. Is there any question that you want the amendment to be? Pardon me?
I guess that's an amendment to the motion, and now you're voting on the motion as amended.
So now we voted on the amendment, now its main motion is,
So now we're gonna vote, there's a second to the amendment, we'll
Amendment.
vote on the amendment, and
Now
then
we're gonna
vote on the
vote.
motion as amended.
Right.
Okay, does anybody have to hear the amendment again? If not, the vote is on the amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Now it's on the full motion,
As amended.
as amended.
Can somebody restate that?
main motion as amended? You want the motion?
I don't think it was very clear. I think we had two separate motions rather than a motion with an amendment, and I just want to make sure this is clear.
The main motion.
We can really ask that.
We got it here somewhere. Yes, it's gonna be November ballot. Motion by Councilor Terry to hold special election on 3/29/19, purpose not allowing marijuana retail establishments in Winthrop. That was the main,
Well,
that was the main motion.
but then it was amended to
Then it was
basically a
amended.
new motion, which states that the town council votes that there will be an election to ban the retail sale of marijuana in Winthrop prior to, by the first Tuesday in November of 2019. Along with that motion would be to get guidance from Rules and Ordinance on proper wording of the motion, along with a letter to the AG's office requesting an extension of the moratorium until the date certain that we would have the election.
Is the motion clear to all the councilors?
Yes.
Yes.
Except, I think we're doing it backwards. I think it should go to the committee first, come back with a question, and then take your vote when you know what you're talking about and where, when, and how, and what the motion will actually
We're
say.
voting to put it to you.
Yep, but that's not what we're, that's not what we're voting.
We're ensuring a vote, but it is
It's going
going
to
through
rules and
the
committee to
right.
clarify language.
Any further discussion on the motion? Are we ready for a vote? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
No.
We have one no.
It's-
Councilor Terry, transfer of 20,000.
Oh, you missed one? Are we not doing the discussion?
No, we
Okay,
already,
okay. So give me a second.
okay.
I'd like to make a motion that the town council vote to transfer $20,000 from the town council reserve to replenish the general fund special article fiscal year 2014 derelict properties for maintenance or of derelict properties and take any other action relative thereto.
Motion
out
has
of
been,
me.
motion has been made out of committee. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it.
I'd also like to make a motion that the town council declare as surplus the following vehicle inventory from the Council on Aging, a 2009 Ford van, VIN number as shown in the motion, plate number M74165, thereby authorizing the treasurer collector to post for sale through an approved auction site or take any other action relative thereto. Came out of committee with positive action.
Motion is out of committee. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Motion by the town manager to move that the town council's vote to adopt MGL Chapter 48, Section 59B, to allow the Winthrop Fire Department to establish a reserve force or take any other action thereto. Do I hear a second?
I make the motion.
You make the motion?
Yeah.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
That way we-
Any discussion on the motion? I think we had a comment by the fire chief the last go. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. New business. As we discussed earlier, I'm going to refer to the town manager to kind of give us an overview of the situation regarding funding an additional kindergarten class. The superintendent of schools is here. I see members of the school committee here that have been working on this. This whole thing has been a work of bringing people together. Years ago, they used to call it the town side and the school side. We don't do that anymore. This is one town, one family. The school department is not a separate entity. It is a department that is functioning very well, I might add, with our new superintendent. So there's been a lot of work, and thank you to the leadership of the town manager bringing this forward relative to the funding, working with the superintendent. So I'll let you take the floor.
Sure. So I will defer any credit with this concerning this project to the school department. They've identified a need, and it is a need that, in my opinion, I believe needs to be met. When I came here and interviewed, I talked about government takes care of two types of people, young people and old people. And these are some of our youngest citizens. Our school department staffs the most people in town. It's our largest department. It's not an adversarial body to the town. It's a town department, and we only function as a town if our schools function as well. And people move here because of the affordability of housing, but also the schools that we can provide. So when something like this comes to my attention, I want to try to rectify it as quickly as possible. I have young children, and again, I talked about this in my interview too. I couldn't be objective if my kids were in these schools, because this wouldn't even be a discussion. I would stuff it down your throats and tell you that this is something you should do if my kids are in these schools, because it's that important to parents. And I honestly can't imagine being in this situation as a parent, but I know the difficulties that our school department has dealt with this, and I know that this is something that could have somewhat be an anticipated consequence of some of the budget decisions that happened in the past fiscal year. But right now, it is my opinion that we are somewhat in an emergency situation, and it's unique, and it's something that I believe needs to be paid for. And there, I hand it over to Lisa.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank the town council, town manager, and the school committee for your consideration of this co-request. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the positive collaborative discussions that have gone on over the past month and a half, and the feedback and support that I've received from council members, from school committee, from parents, from teachers, from Principal Pearson. And since I assume this position as superintendent and educational advocate for the town of Winthrop, I have not been surprised that this continuation of collaborative efforts is still going on. After being gone for a little while and coming back, I wasn't 100% sure of how it was going to look, but I think we have a long-standing, now 10-plus years, of the no more I and my department, but one town, one school system, and one community. So I thank you for listening tonight. So it's kind of an awesome responsibility to have 1,999 students underneath you. And I was responsible 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, for 4, and now it's multiplied to 1,999 children. So your willingness to partner with us is on a critical issue, even if it's just to listen, not always necessarily to say yes or no, but to listen is valued and respected, and I thank you for that. So the request is to add an additional classroom. We currently have 6 kindergarten classrooms. Each one of those classrooms, as of today, 5 of them have 26 students in them, and 1 classroom has 27. The request that I provided you with a packet of information is a request that reflects the least disruption to the students when a change in placement is required after the start of a school year, specifically, in this case, to the kindergarten classrooms at the Gorman Fort Banks. Adding a 7th classroom will come with a little bit of an impact. So the students themselves, all 157 students, are right now spread out over those 6 classrooms. Each classroom has a full-time teacher and an instructional aide assigned to that classroom full-time. Having been in those classrooms multiple times, and also being able to speak from a little bit of experience, having 4 5-year-olds in my lifetime, one can't really understand 5-year-olds unless you see them in action. So 5-year-olds are not aware of their body and space at all. We like to spread ourselves out when we're 5. We can't necessarily sit in a chair for very long periods of time. Our feet don't hit the floor. When we have to use the bathroom, it doesn't necessarily coincide with how fast our legs work to get there, nor are we able to perform the functions that we need to perform by ourselves. There's a lot that goes into the educational process. Students come to kindergarten prepared very differently. Some can hold a pencil and write a full story. Some can't hold a pencil. Some can read. Some cannot. Some can follow directions. Others cannot. And for many of our students, this is the first time they have had a structured educational setting. So if you can imagine 25 little people in a room and the teacher asks you to sit down, how long it takes to actually get 25 little people to sit down. So the request is to add a 7th class, which would take our class size currently, which is 26.1 children per classroom. Now, we certainly don't have one child split up into 6 sections, spread out across 6 classrooms. It's just the math, which I was never good at, so I had someone do it for me for tonight. Adding that 7th teacher would give us approximately 22 kids in a class. Now, that doesn't sound like a huge change, but I did provide you in your packet with a number of items for support and backup, because I feel as though the people that are not involved in the public education day by day should actually have something to look at to justify why the request is there. So in that packet, I provided you with a survey that I did. I had 58 communities respond. And these are public school systems surrounding school districts. And I asked them in that survey how many of these communities have class size of 18 to 23, how many have class size of 23 to 25, and how many communities have class size of 25 or beyond. Part of the survey also, and I know it's really teeny, so if you get a pair of these bad Larrys, it makes it bigger. But if on your computer, you can blow it up. So of those surveys, 51 communities had a class size of 18 to 23. This is out of 58 communities. 6 communities, and at the time, we were one of the 6, at the time I started the survey, have class size in kindergarten of 23 to 25 children. And only 1 community, Fall River, had a class size of over 25. If I did the survey again today, I can tell you one thing factually. We would be in the same spot as Fall River, being two communities that have class size over 25. Happen to know the superintendent of Fall River, and he would like me to let you know that he is not overly proud of the fact that he has 25, and they are looking to do something similar. So that's one thing in your packet. It also spoke to how many classrooms have an additional body in it. I want to be clear that an ESP, or an educational support person, is not a certified teacher. They're there to support the teacher within the classroom, oftentimes having to take one student to the bathroom, leaving a teacher in the classroom with a ratio of 1 to 24 or 1 to 25, depending upon who made it there that day. I also provided you with a projected cost of a new kindergarten classroom with the least amount of transition and disruption. I put in all of the costs associated with that, including fringe benefits, because I wanted to be crystal clear about the actual cost of the classroom when it is filled with furniture, with technology, And I compared the classroom itself that I was creating sort of fictionally to the classrooms that we have in terms of equity. So that would be with furniture, with computers, with additional curriculum. So although the students that will go into the 7th classroom are coming out of classrooms 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, a lot of the curriculum that you use with kindergarten students are consumables. So you can't just take from each, if you took 3 kids from each classroom, you can't take 3 pieces of curriculum and put it in the new classroom. Typically, it's one piece of curriculum that may have a class set. Lively Letters is one of the pieces of curriculum we use to teach children to read, and it comes with a class set of cards. So that class set of cards can't be divided up to go to the next classroom. So that's some of the detail that went into that. I also included you with a copy of Mass General Law 603 CMR 8, which speaks about kindergarten class size. I want to point out that many people were asking about a waiver. I did inquire with the Department of Education when our numbers went over 25 about a waiver. As a former special ed director, detail and compliance are my life, and therefore I felt the need to contact the Department of Ed and ask them to provide me with a copy of the waiver that I needed to fill out, not because I was justifying the class size, but because I wanted to stay in compliance, because it's sort of a game to make sure, a competitive game, to make sure you're 100% compliant. I can report to you factually that that waiver does not exist, that 603 CMR 8 was put in as a regulation in 1978, and the Department of Education Program Quality Assurance has not been asked for that waiver until Compliance Bureau came along and asked for the waiver. It doesn't exist. What does exist is notification to the state, which I had done. So I just wanted to be clear, because I know parents had some concern about that. And I also put in, and I thank you for requiring it, a justification statement. I think the first time I asked for a capital request for the Arthur T. Cummings playground, I had written up sort of a justification statement of my own. So I believe that provides detail that you might not otherwise know when you're trying to consider this. So just a few other little items. Other things that were done prior to putting that projection together and asking for class size was a pre-registration process, planning. We didn't anticipate that there were going to be 26 kids. We anticipated by starting the process early we'd have 24. Between September 1st and September 9th, when registration is typically slowed down, we had 9 kindergarten students register for school in Winthrop Public Schools. And that is highly unusual. However, it happened, and the end result was the number 26. I've had multiple meetings with the kindergarten teachers, done observations, been in the classroom, met with Ms. Pearson. And another important note is that of the 157 kids in our kindergarten, 60 students are identified as ELL, English Language Learners, who are going to require additional assistance. And 17% of the kindergarten class is identified as students on IEPs or students with special needs. Both of those factors in a class of 26 requires additional attention. And last but not least, before I open it up for questions, again, small class size and individual attention is a critical element of early childhood education. It's where the basic concepts and social skills and school behavior begin, and therefore having the class size reduced to 22 is something that I strongly support, and will welcome questions if folks have it about the information that I provided you.
Questions?
Yeah.
Councilman Boncory.
I want to thank you for that thorough presentation. It's one of the most thorough presentations I think we've ever had here on the council.
You should go to the school committee meeting.
I know, sorry, I apologize, I know it's long, but
My question
sorry.
is, because right now we're in violation of state law. The state says you can only have maximum 25 children in a kindergarten class. And because we don't want to be the only one other than Fall River that's in violation of that.
I think
would
Fall
you-
River's used to it.
Are you bringing us this as an emergency motion so that
Yes.
we can vote on it this evening?
Yes,
That's correct.
that's correct.
So I will make an emergency motion
Just a
for
minute.
the council,
Okay, make the motion and then.
and then we
open
can
it
have
up for
discussion,
questions, yes.
okay? The motion, I move that the town council vote to adopt the supplemental school department operating budget for fiscal 2019 from $20,141,310 to $20,295,531, thereby transferring from the General Stabilization Fund the amount of $154,222 to the general fund, which reflects the net increase or take any other action relative thereto.
Motion has been made. Do I hear a second?
Second.
The second has been made. Discussion on the motion.
Thank you, Lisa.
Sure.
I don't think there's much debate at all as to the need for a kindergarten teacher. And I applaud the school and the school system for being very proactive about it. I really thank the members of the school committee that are here, because that's awesome to have the support. Thank Gus for staying up past 8 o'clock. My only concerns with this is, anytime it involves, a substantial amount of money and it changes the budget, I think it always behooves to go to a committee, but I also think this is extremely important. I'm very hesitant. I would like to see the seventh section of kindergarten added with the teacher and the ESP and the furniture and whatever else you need. I'm very hesitant on the additional move in the part-time OTs and LSPs for the high school. I think, I was on the school building committee meeting, and I think our goal was always to have, and continues to be, to have a Tiny Talk program at the high school, not only for the kids, but for the older kids at the high school that benefit from it in their future careers, possibly. I think it's disruption either way. There's, in some respects, more disruption with staying at the fort because of additional classrooms that have to be moved. And in some respects, it's more disruption going to the high school and have parents worrying about pickups and this, that, and the other thing. And I'm extremely reluctant in using, stabilization money to pay for a reoccurring expense. That's, not, I'm sure it's not the way most people would like to do it. We're in an awkward position where it's at the beginning of the budget cycle, and we really don't have that good of an idea of what accounts might be over or not. I mean, we haven't gone through a heating season. We haven't gone through a lot yet. So it's hard to say, as much as I would like to, why don't we take it out of this budget or move it from this budget. I think if it was in the spring, it's a lot easier to try to do that. You have a little better rationalization of where the budgets are. So I'm extremely reluctant to take it out of stabilization fund, but I don't think we have a whole ton of options. I absolutely support the seventh kindergarten teacher. I would absolutely not support the 8,000 in the motion, because I think that's just the school committee being as clear as they can, showing us the cost. Obviously, the fringe benefit line is not in the high school budget, it's in the town budget, so that should automatically be taken out of the motion. And I would like to see the motion reduced to 90 or 95,000 and eliminate eliminate it from going to the high school at this time. I think there's so much thought that needs to be put into that, and have the seniors and juniors and sophomores and freshmen at the high school to be able to take advantage of that. Also to adding additional OTs and other paraprofessionals that, we have them now going from school to school. So, I know certain students have to be seen and they're very tied up now. I mean, I know we got rid of all the quotas a couple of years ago, and it's, now in hindsight, it would be great to have a couple of them back. But, so I would like to make an amendment to the motion to make it to $95,000, and with the realization, with the thought being that it would add the kindergarten teacher and the ESP, along with all the support they needed at the Fort Banks to make it work at the Fort Banks for the rest of this year. So I would make that amendment if there's a second.
Counselor has made a motion to amend the figure to what?
95,000.
Is there a second to his amendment?
Could I just ask a question?
Sure.
Could you provide a little bit of information on what the hiring process would be? It sounds to me like Councilor Lettieri's comments are procedural in nature, and if it sounds like if the issue is that, you know, we should just look at this a little bit closer down the line, but if the money was appropriated now for the hiring, in 2 weeks we could put a motion together to get whatever funding we deem necessary to get you over the finish line. Would that be something that you guys could do, or do you need it all in a lump sum right now?
So in terms of the hiring process, the folks that would be hired would have to obviously follow the Winthrop Teachers Union rules and regulations around postings, and you'd have to post for a kindergarten teacher, we would have to post for an ESP, and we would have to, in the presentation you have before you, which would include, as part of the plan, moving one of the preschool classrooms back to the high school to free up the space. In order to do that and to continue to service those students, we would have to hire a part-time speech pathologist and a part-time occupational therapist. The reason behind that is that the speech pathologist and occupational therapist that are currently servicing the individual students in the preschool are servicing them in an efficient manner, which is group settings. Some students are individual, but for the most part, students are serviced in a group. So if the group is existing and that staff member is working with 4 students in that group, not all 4 of those students are going to be transitioned to the high school if that's the plan that we take. So therefore, you would have to hire additional staff. So the postings would have to be up anywhere from 7 to 10 days. I would ask the union to allow us the least amount of time. The recruitment process is, we'll put it out on School Spring. We also have sort of feeder systems. We have a feeder system with Salem State University now because they are doing fellowships here with graduates, so we would reach out to those people to get someone in as fast as we can. In terms of the ordering of the furniture and all that paraphernalia can be done pretty easily. We have I costed all of that out through WB Mason and some other vendors, so we'd be able to get that relatively quickly. The difficulty is, not the difficulty, but the amount of work around the organization of change and how to provide the least amount of disruption. 5-year-olds go through transitions every day. Parents, I think the parents are going to have more of a transition than the students are, but there has to be a process that it has the least impact on the students coming out of those 6 classes. So there's going to be 3 students coming out of each one of those classes. And how does that happen? That would be determined by the principal and supported by me through discussion, feedback. We would certainly welcome some feedback from the parents, so I would need a few weeks to engage the parents in the process. Eliminating the parents from that discussion is sort of superintendent suicide and would also not allow the transition to work as smoothly as it needs to work. And right down to the conversation with 5-year-olds and how we're going to roll that out. Depending upon which way we go, if we do move the preschool, there'll be less discussion with the current classroom settings that are there now at the fort, because if we move the preschool, I would have to move less, sort of juggle less classrooms at the fort. If we juggle the classrooms at the fort, which can be done, I would have to roll out some work with the special education director around one particular classroom of students with autism. Transition is not their friend. Quick transition is not something that they enjoy, but it certainly can be done. So I think I am looking at a process that could be take anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, but it is going to depend upon the feedback from the parents and the rollout and whether or not we do move a classroom or we move 2 classrooms from within. I don't know if that answered your question, but ideally I would love to have like a week's vacation and we can read books about it ahead of time and transition back after a vacation, but that's too long of a time frame between now and Christmas or a natural break for our kids. The impact on student learning and progress of our students and safety alone is my biggest concern.
Just
Council Booker.
on the amendment, because we're talking about the amendment, I just to point out that this is not cleaning out our capital fund, our general stabilization fund. We still only have $2,197,650 $8.76 in it, which should be able to get us through the year without any really crazy unforeseen problems. And I just like to point out that I'd like to see the pre-K go back to the high school. And I was very upset when they took it out of the high
Right,
school,
right.
because we spent that money to build that beautiful
Correct,
little playground for them,
right,
and then we just took them out of there.
right. And so just as a point of clarity, the goal is to return the program to the high school. That has been the goal since the day that the program had to be removed or moved. It was moved for two purposes. One was to bring it into compliance before the Office of Civil Rights would tell us to bring it into compliance. And unfortunately for the district, the special ed director compliance girl comes back and sees things that need to be corrected immediately, and we had to do that. The other piece of it was we were vying for a large budget increase that we knew that we may not be able to achieve. So having that forethought, we had to create efficiencies in the proposed budget that would allow us to live within our means, and one of those was to make sure, one, we had a compliance issue that we knew we had to correct, but two, we would have also had to have added staff to that building for this school year, and that certainly was not in the budget. And if it did make the final mandated service budget, we would have not cut $423,000 from our level service budget. We would have cut an additional $100,000 of staff members there. So that move was made not to take it out of the high school, which I drive by every day and see that the park is empty. The goal was to put it back as fast as we can. There is certainly going to be a transition, and perhaps I'm anticipating some resistance although we're doing the right thing, I'm anticipating some resistance across the board on this. We're moving students who are already placed in classrooms. We may move a classroom. But from an educational standpoint and from what's in the best interest of the students, student learning and educational progress, I do think that this is the best course of action for the district in terms of adding the classroom.
I think just stay in compliance with the law is.
Well, I sort of can't lose sight of that, sorry.
I agree with Councilor Boncory. I think this is an opportunity for us to solve two problems at once, because I think a lot of us would love to see the pre-K back at where it belongs. And there's nothing like giving a commitment back to the community that we're going to take care of our youngest people in the school system by creating this extra kindergarten class. We have to put them in a position to succeed right off the get-go, and we are immediately recognizing maybe some of the painful things that we had to cut in the budget process that wasn't perfect last time, and we have a chance to correct that now. So I'm stoked and fully supportive of this if you think this is the least disruptive and also puts our kids in the best position to succeed.
Superintendent, how long did it take you to put this whole thing together?
I have to tell the truth, right, because that's what I'm about. I would say, we've probably done about 25, 30 hours worth of work just in gathering information. And certainly I'm not an expert.
In conjunction with members of the school committee?
Absolutely.
Are they supportive of the plan?
100%. After it was fully explained. They're pretty good at poking me. So it was fully explained.
Council Calla.
I just have a question, because I have a grandchild that's in the kindergarten class at that school. Who is going to make the decision as to which children are going to be removed from their class that they're in? Is it going to be a parent that's going to say, my child is able to do it, or is it going to be the faculty?
So because this is my first rodeo with doing a full kindergarten transition like this, but not with setting up programs and determining class placement, what I can tell you is the principal of the building is, under ed reform, is the building-based manager. So parents don't pick their classroom teacher now, and for many years in a row, parents can say, this is the type of learning style my child has, this is the type of teacher I want, can pretty much narrow it down to the color clothes the child wants to see the teacher wear, and if you watch a teacher long enough, you can kind of pick your teacher that way. So the parents will not have control over it, but how we determine who needs to come out when you create this classroom, if you think about equity across the board, which is a huge driver of public education as of this minute, we cannot have an inequitable number of ELL students, special education students, and general education students in a classroom. Right now, we have students pretty much evenly distributed over the 6 classrooms that we have. So we would be building, Ms. Pearson and I will most likely sit down and build a classroom without names, but a classroom that has equity. So how many ELL students can we fit into this classroom, how many special ed students, and how many gen ed students? And then those numbers, if you think about the 6 classrooms we have, to make those numbers go down to 22, we need to take 3 students out of every classroom. So I will be entering into conversation. I felt strongly that I didn't want to get into that conversation prior to tonight, because if I did, I'd be making assumptions that may not come true. So Ms. Pearson and I will sit down and talk about whether or not it makes sense to allow parents to have the opportunity to volunteer for their child to move into a classroom. The impact of that is if 7 students from one particular classroom volunteer and no other students volunteer, I cannot take 7 students out of one classroom, I can only take 3. Because if I take 7 students out, now that class is not at 22, which means I now have to take some kids out of here and put them over here, and it creates this sort of domino effect. So Ms. Pearson and I will come up with a plan that we determine. Most likely it's going to be a lottery, and a lottery with parameters, because if you do a lottery and you're taking 1 ELL, 1 special ed, 1 gen ed kid out of every class, if the first 3 picks are all students with IEPs, then we have to put names back in. So when we call it a lottery, it certainly won't be a true form of a lottery. But prior to making that decision, I'd also like to consult with 2 colleagues who have done it in other communities, in Melrose and Wakefield, 2 superintendents that I have respect for, that have gone through this and taken a little bit of a beating. So I'd like to hear what pitfalls I can avoid based on their experience, and also allow the parents to have input and feedback, because you never know what a parent may come up with in terms of a suggestion that could help us. So the process is going to be made up within the next, hopefully, 48 hours, depending upon your decision.
Okay, there's been an amendment to the motion. Do I hear a second on the amendment to the main motion?
In repeating that amendment, that's to lower the cost.
There was never seconded. He asked the question. Can you repeat the amendment?
Yeah.
For
Could you repeat the amendment?
Oh, definitely.
The amendment was to change the figure from whatever it was, 154, 221.18 to 95,000. The thought process behind the motion being that it would include an additional kindergarten teacher. It would include all the technology and furniture and such, along with the ESP. They would remain at the Fort Banks, and it would give them time to go into next September with a pre-K at the high school, when the high school would be able to be ready for the adjustments, and parents would be able to be ready for pickups. So that was the motion.
Is there a second to the motion?
I second the motion.
The motion has been seconded. Discussion on the motion.
Question for Superintendent? Lisa, Superintendent,
I'm
how
sorry,
many
yes.
sections in first grade right now?
7.
Okay, so that would maintain next year regardless, probably.
So based on the projections based on the current numbers of the kindergarten, if those numbers stay the same and don't decline dramatically, then you would continue to have 7 in first grade.
In the kindergarten, we wouldn't know until.
Kindergarten, we won't know, but I'm hoping not to make a practice of coming back to the town for a supplemental budget. So, my projections as they were prior to our budget being finalized, hopefully will be as accurate next time around.
Any further discussion on the motion? Yes.
Yes, so, Councilor Terry, so what items here are you proposing to remove?
The only one that
Everything
would
below?
remove would be the $8,000 for fringe benefits, because that shouldn't, that was more for clarification, I think, than a request. And the $50,000 needed at the bottom for the for the OT and the
SLP.
The SLP for this. So that would
prevent.
So the 7th grade, the pre-K now, the 3 sections of pre-K would maintain in the Goldman Fort Banks, along with the 7 kindergartens. So I think, I'd ask Lisa to explain the difference and how it would be a little harder
So if
to
you
have the
don't-
7.
So the way Councilor Terry is proposing it, you would not move the preschool classroom to the high school now. You would wait until September. And that, therefore, you wouldn't need the additional part-time PT and the part-time OT. So you could eliminate the $50,000, because in order to move them, I need the service delivery for those students. And the change would be that the program would stay, the kindergarten class would still go at the Gorman Fort Banks. We would make some movement of the students within the Gorman Fort Banks, the classroom, to free up space. Because if you move the preschool over, I don't have to do anything else, then the kindergarten goes in that open classroom, just fill it with furniture. If we do it the other way, still doable, we would have to move a few classrooms around within, and there would be an impact on a couple of different classrooms versus just the one. There's an impact irregardless of what we do. And then the $8,000 in fringe benefits. When I walked in here, the school department owned the fringe benefits as of, I believe, the last budget. Fringe benefits were turned back over to the town. Doesn't mean we can pretend that they don't exist. We've been very mindful, and I actually have kept score. That whole competitive athlete thing still reigns in me. I've kept score of the number of people that we have hired this year and the total number of people that have taken benefits versus those people that left last year. And we are very mindful of that and are keeping that in the forefront because benefits are quite costly. And in our hiring of teaching staff, we will be creative. And if there are people that potentially could work part-time, a split a position that happened to be kindergarten certified and much stronger in terms of their experience than someone else who would be a full-time employee, certainly that'd be something that we would be considering. And if it's a split position, then there's no benefits. That wouldn't be a requirement. It would depend upon that person's skill set.
So with that amendment, you feel you still can accomplish what you need to accomplish?
So could I accomplish it? Yes. The answer to that question is yes, I could accomplish it. I was clear in the presentation that this would be the least disruptive to students. There's going to be disruption irregardless. I have had lots of feedback, and when we moved that preschool classroom back to the Gorman Fort Bank School, the resistance was real. The parents were not happy. The intent, I was on, just full disclosure, the design of the new middle high school back in the day when I was working here as the PPS director, and was a strong advocate for a learning lab for preschool. At the time, we had medical careers class, we had child growth and development with Lee Michella, and we were sending students to local preschools within the community to get their service hours within the pre-K classroom. I feel strongly that the pre-K classroom itself and the special education cafe, which is another project that we had incorporated into the MSBA project, I feel strongly that both of those projects were the tip over. I participated in many drills by the MSBA at tables 5 times this night where people hammered us as to why Winthrop Public Schools should have a new middle high school. And I think both of those selling points put us over the top in terms of points and getting that school approved for a project.
So if the amendment passes, then you just don't move the program back to the high school?
Correct.
You will address that during the budget process next year?
Correct, and we're addressing it now. So part of our thinking forward about school for next year, our budget management and discussions and staff breakdowns have already started in terms of programming and building our budget for next year based on our strategic plan. And our strategic plan action steps do include developing that program with outcomes of the high school students that are working within that classroom. What are the outcomes and the benefits to those students? What's the educational expectation of being in that classroom? Tightening that program up and also making it a classroom that's compliant with the Department of Education's rules and regulations around inclusion and special education support.
Any further discussion about the motion?
The amendment?
The amendment, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that I don't feel in a position to second guess what the superintendent comes up with as the best solution for this disruption, and I wouldn't support the amendment because I do feel like this is actually corrective action to what should have happened in our budget process the last time around, and we didn't get to that because it was hodgepodgey and there was too much transition. And now we have an opportunity to actually do right by all these people and these parents and these students. And I'm not willing to cut it in half.
Anyone else wish to be heard? Yes.
One more thing, Lisa. So this pre-K class that is proposed to move back to the high school, middle school, technically that wouldn't happen until around Christmas time anyway. Is that correct?
Potentially, I mean, we did the pre-work associated with figuring out which class it would be, which is pretty intricate details. You have to look at the IEPs of students, find out which student is not involved in any other aspect of the Gorman-Fort Bank school. So there's only a certain classroom that we're going to be able to move over, and it would be an AM and a PM integrated classroom. And so we have two of those that provide an AM session and a PM session. We looked at the service delivery of the students in those programs to see where we could keep the cost at the lowest. It is the end game of what we were going to do with the preschool next year anyway, just making sure we were right-sizing it. So I would say that there needs to be a little bit of work, not only with the teacher, with Ms. Pearson, and with the students for a transition, and as well as the parents. If parents have kids in both schools, we may need to alter the time, because the pickup and drop-off time of preschool, if you have a preschooler and a kindergartner, and you had both students in one school, and now you're gonna have to go to two different places, and we can work with that, but we can identify that. I can tell you they'll be happier about the traffic pattern, which, don't get me started on valet parking students, because that's what we do.
Anyone else?
No, but my question was, that wouldn't happen until December?
I would say
it wouldn't be happening prior to.
It could happen all at the same time. It just depends how open to the transition, and there's a lot that goes into transitioning, so it could happen prior. That would be a reasonable time frame for that particular classroom to move. That would be a reasonable time frame.
So, but my point is, so that they'd already be like halfway through the school year. So I don't know how would those other programs come into play with moving the classroom back to the high school. Maybe
So
I'm losing something, and I understand why now. You said you'd maybe get two part-time
So if that classroom were to move back to the high school, we need the classroom space. So that classroom would have to move back to the high school to open up that place.
Right.
So they sort of do have to happen at the same time. So it's, the faster we can do it, just based on, we wouldn't be asking to make the class size smaller if it wasn't an emergent issue, so I don't want to I don't want to drag it out too far. The goal is to do it as fast as
Well, you made it sound like you could make some space for that 7th class.
So if we were to keep it internally and we weren't going to move the preschool over, we would then have to look at the school itself and say, we have to move these two classes. One class would move to a much smaller classroom, then a special education self-contained classroom would move upstairs to that freed up space, and then the kindergarten would move to the first floor. In kindergarten, it's all about bathrooms. I'm not gonna lie, bathrooms and access to outdoor and not using stairs. 5-year-olds are not overly talented on 1 foot at a time, so we try to keep them off the stairs if we can.
Anyone else wish to be heard? On the motion.
Amendment.
On the amendment, excuse me.
Sorry.
It's getting late. Hearing none, we'll take a vote on the amendment to the main motion. All in favor of the amendment to change the figure to $95,000 as proposed by Council Lettieri, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
No.
The ayes have it. I mean, the noes have it. Don't mind that. Okay, back to the main motion. Any discussion on the main motion?
Just one amendment on the main motion to make it from 154, 221.18 to 146, 221.18 to take out the $8,000 for fringe benefits because it's not a line item that the school has.
Okay.
I mean, it makes no sense to.
Do I hear a second on the motion to take out the figure of $8,000? Do I hear a second? Is that necessary?
Second it for discussion.
Okay,
Is that
second.
essential, or was that
So I put it in there because I'm all about the clarity, and I wanted to make sure folks knew that there was fringe benefits, and as long as the town is, paying that out of a separate line item, that's fine. If it's going to be in the line item of the school, then it would be required. We would need that.
So you don't?
Well, can we just ask, for the town manager clarification, is the fringe benefits would be paid out of the town fringe benefit?
They're paid out of the town fringe benefits. At the same time, though, that if we're operating with the budget that it currently was, if you're taking money out of a stabilization fund to fund the entire nature of this, you would be basically doing the 146 to the school and 8 to cover the benefits into our benefits line. So you're moving money out of the stabilization fund either way. So, I mean, it could be an additional transfer down the line from the schools for the $8,000. But like it's, you could also, I mean,
You just need the total amount.
it needs to level out. It's something that I think could be accommodated, but again, I think just for clarification and going with the information that the superintendent presented, that's a number we could stick with, and I can work with the superintendent concerning how the benefits get paid for.
Any further discussion? You taking that motion down?
I'll take it back.
Okay. Before we get into the main motion, Councilor Boncory tells me that we need to take a vote to certify that this is an emergency.
Yeah, we need a vote on the issue.
Okay. You want to make that motion?
I make a motion that we adopt this motion as an emergency. A second. Our charter under 2.9 states that you have to have a separate vote to declare it an emergency. Before you can just say it's an emergency.
The motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. On the main motion, any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a roll call, please.
Counselor Ingman? Yes. Counselor Callow?
Yes.
Counselor Christopher?
Yes.
Counselor Terry?
No.
Counselor Soto?
Yes.
Counselor McDuffie?
Yes.
Counselor Conti?
Yes.
Vice President Boncory?
Yes.
President Vecchia?
Yes.
8-1, passes.
8-1, passes.
Once again, I'd like to thank the committee, the school committee, all the committees that I deal with. And I can assure you I will come back to the committee with an update on the progress, an update on the timeline, so that we have that information for your community members. And if there are any other questions in the meantime, feel free to ask me.
Thank you,
I'll provide
Susan.
with that. Appreciate your time.
Under new business discussion of town council November meeting. Denise, what did we come up with?
November 7th? November 21st.
Anybody have a problem with the dates in November? I know the 21st is Thanksgiving week. Is that a problem for anybody?
It's a conflict for me.
Conflict? Okay.
Anyone
Why
else?
why are we not doing
Can
it?
we just do, it's election day.
I know, but why don't we just
Do one meeting the third week, the second week? Right, that's what I
That's
was.
what we're discussing.
We were discussing, but yet we have the bylaw marijuana, and we're gonna need a couple of meetings to make this happen. I think, I mean, I don't know if it can be done in one meeting. It's being
No, we
referred to
have
as rules and
fall
ordinance.
forum too. So is that happening?
Fall
Did have
forum.
a fall forum, yeah.
You already referred it.
Right, it's already referred for the marijuana, that's just gonna come back for a vote. Unless you wanted to, Council President, unless you wanted to do a meeting on the 13th and then the fall forum the following week and just have, and
Have the 20th.
you could potentially have a short meeting if there's anything that we need before the fall forum. You know what I mean, like a 6 o'clock meeting to 7, if there's any issues that we need to, that are pressing, that can't wait until the first weekend of December. So go to one council meeting and a fall forum with the option to have a quick meeting.
How does
before the
everybody
fall
feel?
That works for me.
Town manager?
Fine, whatever you guys want to do.
So November 13th and the 20th, fall forum.
Yep.
If we need a small meeting, we'll have it before.
At 6
You gotta
o'clock.
make a motion.
And the
Kick the
20th,
rules out.
right, and the 20, to make a motion to amend council rules to change the meetings in November. The new meetings date will be November 13th at 7 PM at the Harvey Room, and November 20th at the DeLeo Senior Center with a 7 o'clock fall forum date and potentially a 6 o'clock council meeting.
Motion has been made to revise the schedule for November.
I'll second.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Everybody else is gone. Okay, public comment. You have 3 minutes.
Just take
Mrs.
a minute.
Vecchia.
Linda Vecchia, Precinct 6. I want to thank you all for putting your personal feelings aside on the referendum about us being able to take the town of Winthrop to vote on the subject of whether having marijuana being sold. I've had this conversation with many of you throughout the past year and had our little battles discussing about the sell or smoking of marijuana. This has nothing to do with what I do, my passion with substance abuse. I do have a family member who's in recovery from hardcore drugs, but started with marijuana and worked her way up. Gratefully, she's 9 years sober. I have 7 grandchildren and hopefully more to come. I really feel having our small community having a substance abuse, having more drugs or alcohol purchased and sold in the town does not benefit us. It's not just a youth thing, as we know what marijuana does do to the brain. Whether you have it controlled, you have 1 puff here and there as you get older, but our adult population, between the alcohol and marijuana use, is really high. Like they had stated before, we don't have control about, somebody gets busted for drinking. We do know what will happen, but not with marijuana. We can't test it. So I'm just really grateful that you're allowing our town to vote on a very important decision. I know it was a state at the beginning, but I do believe everybody was not quite informed. I voted no from the beginning. I would still vote no again. I'm just not one who wants to promote more substance abuse in the body as well as smoking. As we've gone through different people in town, and I'm only saying this because I'm not a hookah smoker, but that went through a lot of publicity about not allowing someone to have hookah in the town because it's not healthy. Whether you smoke it or not, if it's fruit, you're still inhaling it. Same as I'm grateful that we're not having with all the vaping and changing the cigarette law to 21. So I just wanted to say this is an important issue. This is more addictive as well as cigarettes. And thank you for allowing us to have the opportunity to vote for ourselves. And thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to be heard? This gentleman here.
Yeah, my name's Brad, Precinct 6. I guess I'll just say that Dottie and I have been working on this committee, and under Article 8, Section 8.5, what I was walking around with, and what Dottie was so kind enough to set up, was the petition, shall Winthrop adopt the following bylaw to prohibit the operation of 1 or more types of marijuana establishments within Winthrop. I just wanted to thank the council for alleviating me of the task of, I have 120 odd signatures here. I personally went door to door. I don't know how many other folks Dottie had going door to door, but I was knocking on doors, talking to people about it and getting signatures. I started with 120. I just wanted to say thank you for allowing us to vote. I don't have to beat my feet anymore. But that's how serious I feel about it, so thank you.
Anyone else wish to be heard?
Point of information, if I may. In the interim that it goes to you, Mr. Boncory, and your commission, is it going to be a case of where our town manager gets to draft a letter that's going to go to the AG's office? Is the AG letter going out, and then the rules and committee is going to internally say the town will handle it
It'll
X,
both
Y,
happen
Z?
at the same time.
I'll be sending out a letter tomorrow or
letter
Thursday.
tomorrow, and on the
Could
9th,
we be privy to a copy of that? Is that appropriate?
Sure.
sure. And on the 9th will be my meeting.
Oh, we'll be there.
Okay, I think you better change the rules then.
We'll be there.
Seriously.
No, we trust you, and again, as my committee member Brad pointed out, we thank you sincerely for this opportunity, and we hope that it does get approved. We're going to push very hard with our contacts into Boston to make sure that we can get it on November, and that'll save you $20,000, and you can put that toward the schools. God bless.
Yes.
Ralph DeMarco, Precinct 6. Town Manager Austin, I think this question is for you. I spoke to you at the forum at the high school, and we had talked about how if we collected the signatures after the people voted, it would then have to be voted on by the town council. Because the town council voted tonight, they still have to do that after the vote.
They only voted to put it on the ballot.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to be heard? Hearing none. Public relations for upcoming events. The remaining 2018 street sweeping dates, October 22nd to the 26th. The Halloween hunt, sponsored by the Webster First Credit Union, starts at 4 o'clock on the 31st in the Winthrop Center. That's always been a great take. The Cub Scouts are going to be doing their Scarecrow event in the Winthrop Center, and we'll have to have a little discussion with them on how to hang them this year. They did a great job. But, we'll have to-
They're real people.
Yeah, I know. And let's see, November 2nd is the Sip of Winthrop at the Cottage Park Yacht Club from 7 to 9 p.m., sponsored by the Winthrop Chamber of Commerce. And finally, on November 20th is the Town Council Fall Forum at the DeLeo Center at 7 o'clock. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Motion.
Motion?
Adjourn.
Second it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Good night, folks.